Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling Podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. Well, seeing how we're pulling Category 6A, the most powerful twisted pair in the world, you got to ask yourself this one question. Did I pull 295 or 300 feet? Well, do you feel lucky? Do you, punk? What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. The elite professional, knowledgeable, and experienced in leading-edge ICT design principles. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Welcome to Thursday night after hours live with Chuck Bowser, RCDD, my usual Thursday night stream. Let me fix that camera just a smidgen. How is everybody doing tonight? Man, this has been a great week. A great week. I hope it's a great week for you too. One of the reasons I say it's a great week is because this week is Infocom in Orlando. Yes, Infocom. Where's my thing at? Oh, I just cut it off. I was at Infocom. So I got to walk around and see all the new AV stuff. Pretty cool stuff going on. Fluke was there. I stopped talking to Jim Davis for a little bit. Bixie was there, so I got to talk to Nolan and oh gosh, I know the guy, but I can't think of his name off the top of my head. So I talked to them for a little while, and I went around and looked at all the new cool stuff. I'm telling you, this is a great time to be in this industry. A great time to be in this industry because there's so much new stuff coming out. It's just amazingly cool stuff. If you're not doing AV, you should be. There's all kinds of new cool stuff coming out. And it's being integrated over category-rated cable, and it's just... I said this before, and I'll say it again. I wish I was at the beginning of my career instead of the end of my career because there's so much great stuff happening. So much great stuff happening. Okay, so let's get on with the show. As you know, how do we start off every show? What are you drinking? What are you drinking? Put it in the chat box. Now, I literally just came from a class. I mean, literally, I was panicking last minute trying to get everything in. So this is just my leftover water from teaching my class. So for tonight, for me, it's water. What are you guys drinking? Put in the chat box. Ooh, that's not water. That's Zevia Cola. I forgot that I got myself a Zevia Cola. No sugar, all the flavor. So, Cable Dog Supreme is in the house. Hello, Cable Dog Supreme. Glad to have you back. And, of course, fan favorite, Shotzi's in the house. I'm going to make a contest every week and say, what is Shotzi drinking this week? And let's see if people can guess what it is. So, very cool, very cool. So now, if you know the first step, you know what the next step is, right? How do we do every single show? The acronym challenge. The acronym challenge. So today's acronym is SNR. Well, before I tell you what SNR is, I got to do my usual acronym, my safety announcement. Please spay or neuter your acronyms. We have enough. We don't need any more. Help control the population of acronyms. So look at that. Very good. Brad G is in the house with the correct answer. 10,000 points for Brad G. 10,000 points, buddy. Don't cash them all in one spot. So what is signal noise ratio? It's generally used in wireless. And it's used to describe the difference between the received wireless signal and the noise of the floor. I don't mean the actual floor. I'm talking about there's general noise anyway. Like, for example, if I was to shut off and quit talking and you record with a microphone, there's a noise level. So, for example, let's say my incoming signal was minus 75 dB. My floor level was minus 90 dB. That would mean I'd have 15 dB of usable space to send that signal out. So it is signal to noise ratio. Excellent, Brad. Good job, buddy. Good job. So as for those who may be new to the show, may not know how this goes, oh, so look at that. Here he goes. Now you're just showing off, Brad. You're just showing off now, buddy. Good job. That's another 10,000 points. Another 10,000 points. And by the way, if you're new to the show, how this works, you submit your questions. I kind of watched the chat box. I got some questions that were submitted ahead of time. I try to catch the ones left over from last week and roll them in with this one. And people send me messages throughout the week, either email, questions@letstalkcabling.com. So they usually send me emails in advance, or they comment on a YouTube video that I do, or they might send it to me via TikTok or Instagram. And I collect those during the week, and then I put them into things. So welcome, everybody. If you have a question, let me do this. I talked to my wife about doing the whole working behind the scenes for me thing. And one day I just got to sit down and do a practice session with it. So there you go. Put your questions in the comment section. Now, before we get started with your questions, let's cover some questions that were left from last week. So John from Arizona. John wants to know, if a rack is grounded, do shielded patch panels still need to have their own individual grounds? That's a great question. Great question. First thing I'm going to tell you to do, follow the manufacturer's instructions, because most of them will tell you it has to. Some will tell you it doesn't. Some will tell you it has to be a number 14. Some will tell you it has to be a number 6. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. If you have any experience with shielded patch panels, make sure that you put it in the chat box as well. Aaron's in the house. Aaron usually sends me questions through YouTube channel on the comment box. So I'll try to get you an answer here as soon as I finish these ones, Aaron. Okay. And everybody else, make sure to be putting questions. So follow manufacturer instructions. If the manufacturer does not specify, does not give you any input, my advice to you is yes. Each shielded patch panel has to have its own unique connection to a ground source. Right? Now, what does that mean? That does not mean that if you got a rack that's got 10 shielded patch panels in it, that doesn't mean you have to run 10 wires all the way back to the bonding bus, the secondary bonding bus bar or the primary bonding bus bar, depending on which room it's sitting in. No. Matter of fact, that's not a good way to do that, because with bonding and grounding conductors, you want to try to keep them, two rules, as short as possible and as straight as possible. And when you have multiple conductors, you want to make sure that they try to be equal lengths. So if you have a rack and you've got 10 shielded patch panels, if you run 10 individual ground bonding conductors back to the bus bar, those bonding conductors are all going to be separate lengths. And that's not good. You have a difference of potential there. The best way to do shielded patch panels, if they don't get the website, the bonding conductor that goes across on the relay rack above that shielded patch panel, the relay rack, take an irreversible compression style fitting. That's important. I'm going to say that again. Irreversible compression style fitting, not a split bolt. Okay. Irreversible. Connect it to that, strip off a little bit of the conductor, attach it to that, run your conductor all the way down to the footprint of the rack, and then attach it to the rack. And by the way, good metal contact. That means take paint off the rack. That means use a star washer, whatever the case may be. Good metal contact. So now all you got to do is cut 10 short jumpers to go from the shielded patch panel to the vertical conductor that goes down. They're all the same length. And then you attach them to that vertical conductor with, can you guess it? Irreversible compression style fittings. Yes. So there you go. Another way you could do that, if you have the money, you can do a vertical rack grounding bus bar. That's a miniature bus bar that's a couple inches wide, and it literally goes up and down the vertical side of the bus bar. But those things are expensive. Okay, so that's the answer to your question, Mr. John. I hope that helped you. So the next question is from Steve in Oregon. Oregon? I don't know. You know where it is. It's out there on the West Coast, just below Washington. Cool area. I taught there once. He says, I am trying to find a fire stop system for penetration. How do I know which is the right one to use? So there's a couple things that you got to, I should make a flow chart on this. There's a couple steps that you got to go through to be able to figure out which is the best path fire stop system for you. The first you got to figure out is what is the rating of the assembly that you're going to go through. Okay, now I said assembly. An assembly can be a wall or it can be a floor. Okay, those are two different ratings. A lot of people don't know that. So you need to know the rating of that wall. So generally, if you're doing that, you can count the sheets of drywall. Right? If you've got one 5/8 inch thick gypsum board on each side of that wall, that's a 1 hour barrier. If each side has two sheets of gypsum board that are 5/8 inch thick, that's two on each side, that's going to be a 2 hour rated wall. So now that you know the rating of the wall, and for blocks, it depends on whether it's cinder block, brick. The backs of the fire stop catalogs are great for helping you do this. Hilti's, I think, I should get one with STI. I've dealt with the Hilti one for many, many years. STI, if you're listening, send me one of your catalogs. I'd like to go through it and see if it's got that selection thing. So once you know the rating of the wall, now you know what system that you got, what rating system you got to pick, right? And so you look for those 2 hour rated systems or 1 hour rated, whichever it is. But you do have to know what is that wall made out of, right? So somebody having problems typing tonight. So you got to know what that is, because blocks, bricks, gypsum board, and also need to know if it's got metal studs or wood studs, right? Now, once you know that, you got to look at the size of the opening, and then you also got to figure out, once you got your system, you know how big it's got to be. Now, you got to be careful here, because when you put in cut the hole for the fire stop system to put it through the wall, whether it's a round one or one of the square ones, generally you got to cut a hole bigger than the actual assembly that you got to put through that wall. So that's going to leave a gap. And because of that, you got to leave what's called a cold smoke seal. Cold smoke seal. So a cold smoke seal, what it does, it keeps the smoke on this side of the fire barrier until the fire can get there and the heat can get there and activate the fire stop. So the cold smoke seal helps contain the smoke to that small room that you're dealing with. Then you need to know the number and types of cable that are going to go through that assembly, because you might have to calculate the fill ratios. I actually have two fill ratio calculators. One is from Hilti. I think the other one's from Leviton, if I remember right. If anybody's interested in any one of those, shoot me an email, chuck@letstalkcabling.com. Say, Chuck, send me the calculator, and I'll send it to you. Just remember, it's Hilti's. It's not mine, so I can't vouch for its accuracy. But it's from Hilti, so I would think it'd be pretty good. And the reason I say that is because, you need to know the size of the cable. Well, category 6A cable, let's just pick that one for giggles, can be up to 0.357 of an inch. Cat 5E can be 0.18, 0.19. So you need to know the numbers and types so you can put in that calculator and then calculate it out to figure out your fill ratios. Now, once you know your fill ratio, you got to be careful, right? Oh, good to know. CommScope has a good one. Is it on their website, Aaron? I don't know. Is it available on the website? If it is, let me know. Because if it is, I'm gonna download that thing. I love fill ratio calculators. Then you got to look at the fill ratio that fire stop system has been tested for. Okay. Now, a general rule, if you average out all the fill ratios, it's 28%. But there are some systems out there that can have a 100% fill ratio, meaning you could literally have a jam-packed full of stuff and literally not get another cable through that assembly, and it is still good to go. There's some old, I keep bumping my desk and it keeps shaking the camera. I apologize for that. There's some old round Hilti systems that are only good up to 18%. So if it's only good to 18% and you filled it to that 28% that I averaged, I talked about earlier, there's not enough fire stop material around the bundle of cables to function correctly. And that's going to cause problems, right? You also need to know the annular fill. most of your systems. Some of the systems you don't, but some of the older round systems where you're packing in the putty. By the way, that UL drawing is going to tell you if you have to have mineral wool or if you don't have to have mineral wool. It's going to tell you what is the minimum and maximum annular spaces that you need to have, and you got to be within those parameters. If you're not, then there's not enough fire stop for it to function correctly. If there's too much, there's other problems. So you got to be within those annular spaces that they define in the UL drawing. The UL drawing is basically like an instruction sheet. I remember 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now. That was actually before I started for my current job, so it had to be more than 10. There was an inspector in North Carolina, because I learned this because I was doing QA inspections for my previous previous company. And the AHJ, the electrical inspector, literally got a ladder out, climbed up the ladder, and measured the depth of the putty. And then he looked up the UL drawing because we had the sticker on the wall and the UL drawing on it, and he looked it up to make sure that we did it correctly. Some inspectors are really good at their job. Some are, and some aren't, unfortunately. So yeah, make sure that you follow that. And like I said, the Hilti catalog is really good because it walks you through the process. What are you penetrating? What is the wall, floor, whatever? And then it actually tells you, okay, look at these 3 pages, and then it'll narrow it down to which system, and you can pick it out. But what do you do though if you can't find an exact match? There's a thing called an engineering judgment. So if you contact whatever fire stop manufacturer that you deal with, Hilti, STI, Unique. I'm doing that fire stop video, guys. Got the stuff in the back. I got some vacation time coming up, so I'm really going to buckle down and get that done. So you can contact whoever the fire stop manufacturer is that you got, and you can tell them the parameters, the number of cables, the types of cables, the pathway, the hole that's going through. Is it a wall or a floor? Again, they're tested separately. What's the thickness? What's it made out of? And they will give you what's called an engineering judgment. That's as good as a UL drawing, as a UL number. Just make sure that you document that process. Okay, document it. 3 most important things in our industry. What are they, people? If you've been on my show in the past, you've heard me say this more than once. The 3 most important things are documentation, and the third one is documentation. I was waiting to see somebody type it in the chat box. Nobody typed it in there. So yeah, follow that along. Pro tip number 1 for the night: if you're doing fire stop systems, even if it doesn't require it, put a sticker on the wall that says the date it was installed, the company who installed it, and what UL drawing you followed. Pro tip number 2 for the night: take your camera phone. Okay, everybody's got camera phones now, and take a picture of it. Oh, new sticker. Hey, I'm going to start this tonight. I'm announcing it here. I have about 45 stickers left over. If you want one for free, go to my website, www.letstalkcabling.com, sign up for the newsletter. The next 45 people who sign up for it, I will send you a Let's Talk Cabling sticker for free. All you got to do is just join the email list, right? So take a digital picture of that because that falls under one of those 3 rules, documentation, right? So that way, if somebody comes behind you, let's say, like, for example, the Valcom person, they come behind you to run some speaker cable through there, and they pull out that fire stop system, and they don't put it back in, well, you got proof that you did it right. Over the past 15 years, give or take, maybe a little bit longer, general contractors, when they do large projects and stuff, they've been telling people, do not fire stop. Do not fire stop. Why are they saying that? You think, wait, Chuck, fire stopping is a life safety thing. They're saying that because they have hired a separate fire stopping contractor to come behind everybody to do the fire stopping correctly. Now think about this from an a general contractor's perspective. If you're a general contractor, what are some of the trades that you have working underneath you? You got the electricians, the low voltage guys, and why is there a low voltage and a high voltage, right? And GCs don't know that, right? You're going to have plumbers, you're going to have HVAC people, and all kinds of different trades, and they're all making holes in those fire-rated assemblies. Now GC, when they look at something going through the wall, they may not be able to determine which one of their contractors, which one of their people in the site made that hole. So by hiring a separate company to just do fire stopping, that's a one point of contact. And on the flip side of that, now they know that fire stop was installed correctly because that company's trained their people. When you look at trades, now the low voltage industry's gotten really good at doing fire stopping and stuff. Some of the other trades have not. But even still, there's some that are trained and some aren't trained. Do you know what really kicked off the fire stopping industry in our industry? There's two major events. One was the Meridian One building in Philadelphia, and the other was the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Now, I told you, if you've been an audience member for a long period of time, you know that I spent about 9 years as a volunteer firefighter. That's why I love fire stopping and fire and all that fun stuff. Plus, just it is what it is. I live on a farm. I love burning stuff. So I was curious one day, and I actually looked up the fire report for the MGM Grand. And the MGM Grand, 250 people, 260 people, something like that, died in that event, right? The fire started on the first floor. There was an electrical receptacle that shorted out in the kitchen, and it caught on fire. That fire doubles in size every 90 seconds, so the fire just started doubling, and it came out and actually hit the main floor where all the casino stuff is. Now, if you've been to a casino, you know they're very ornate. They have lots of fancy stuff. Well, they had these really fancy ceiling tiles glued to the ceiling. Well, the glue that they used on the ceiling was extremely flammable, even after it cured. Now, the fire department got there in 4.5 minutes, which is a pretty good response time. Yeah, our average, when I used to be a firefighter in PG County, Maryland, hence the Maryland flag. I don't live in Maryland anymore. Our average response time for our engine company was 7 minutes, right? And we had a small first due. Only 2 people on the first floor died. Everybody else were on floors 2 and above because all that smoke was going up through the stairwells and up through the penetrations. As somebody pointed out, who was it? It was Brad, right? He said high-rise fires. Smoke rises. People were found dead laying in their bed, dead on the floor, dead in the hallways, dead in the stairwells because smoke is the number one killer of people in a building fire. The second cause of death is death by smoke opacity, right? Which means that you suffered some kind of injury because of so much smoke. So, yeah, that's what really kicked it off. And our industry's gotten really good at it. But when you look at other trades, they don't necessarily aren't that good with fire stopping. And that's, if you watch this week's podcast or this week's vlog, I did a thing called free training. And I'm doing a follow-up because I got a lot of questions about that. So, and one of the things that I mentioned was a podcast by STI. It's called Feel the Burn. If you listen to podcasts, if you don't, you should be. Look that podcast up and subscribe to it. Great content. Great content. Right. So let's go to the next question. This one's from Marina in New Mexico. And she says, we have a job with abandoned cable. How do I know to remove it? How do I know what to remove? And how do I even begin to put a price to this? Those are great questions. Great questions. So let's talk about abandoned cable, right? Now, legally, you're supposed to remove abandoned cable. There's this thing called the grandfather clause, and there's the percentage. If it's below a certain percentage, and you got to bring above that percentage, you got to bring up the code. But for the most part, when the electrical inspector comes out and looks at the job, he's going to tell you they want you to remove abandoned cable from the ceiling. Why do they want that to happen? Because it's a fuel load for a fire. Now, what do I mean by that? I was on a cable installation maintenance webinar 2 years ago, maybe even 3 now, because as you get older, time flies. And if somebody is watching this webinar, or if the person who was the speaker on this, talk to me. I want to follow up with you and do an interview with you. Anyways, I don't remember who it was. It was one of the cable tray manufacturers. And they were talking about cable trays. And somebody asked a question about abandoned cables, and they said, look, if you have a cable tray that's 12 inches wide, filled 6 inches tall, a 6-foot section filled with cable, puts off the same BTUs as a gallon of gasoline. And he quoted that from the NFPA. So you have to remove abandoned cable. Now, let's be realistic here. The only time the authority having jurisdiction is going to really inspect your cables if you file for a permit. Some of your smaller jobs, you may not be filing for a permit. So there may not be an inspection. So that brings that whole moral versus legal obligations. Legally, you're obligated. You are, I would say you are morally too, but there's some people out there looking, I don't want anything to do with that. Now, and it tells us in the code book in 800.25, 770.25, and 725.25 that all accessible portions of abandoned cable shall be removed. All accessible portions of abandoned cable shall be removed. What is accessible portion? Accessible portion means you can easily remove it without damaging permanent building structure. It's a drop tile ceiling, or it's got access ports. You open that up ceiling, you get to it, and you take out the wire. It's got to come out. A hard ceiling, like you can't see it here, but my office here, I've got a solid ceiling. If I was to have abandoned cables running through my ceiling up here, I would not have to remove them because the only way to get to them would be open permanent building structure. Now you need to know what's the legal definition of abandoned. Abandoned says a cable that's not terminated at both ends or connected to a piece of equipment or is not identified with a tag of sufficient durability are considered to be abandoned cables. Okay. So how do you know? So the first question she asked was, how do I price that? Well, actually, the last question. Let's talk about that one first. How do you price that? Good question. Good question. Because it's an unknown quantity. You don't know how much you're pulling out. Is it just 2 cables or is it 200 cables? You don't know. The best way to do it is time and material, where you keep track of your hours and the materials you use and you charge the customer for that. Most customers will shy away from that. They don't like T&M. They feel that we're gonna charge them more than we actually work. And that's not how contractors work, but that's the perception out there, unfortunately. So it's got to come out. It has to come out. Now, when you're talking about moving abandoned cable, one of the things you got to be super, super careful with is if you're removing abandoned cable, you're going to knock somebody down. It's going to happen because you don't know that. But if you're pulling your cables through a bundle of other cables, the cables might be intertwined. They might be Velcroed together. They might be tie wrapped together. And you're yanking on this cable. Next thing you know, you cause a circuit to go down. My brother, who's also in communications, I'm interviewing him on the podcast here shortly. We're going to talk about some stories. I just hope he doesn't tell any embarrassing ones about me. And him and I were removing some abandoned cable from a project one time, and we knocked down a circuit in an adjacent suite. So that brings up my point. You better have whatever tools that you think you're going to need, right? Punch tool, toner and probe, a continuity tester, a certifier. You also better have whatever tools that you don't think you need, right? Yeah, because you don't know what you're going to knock down. You don't know what you're going to knock down. So it's got to be removed. It's got to be removed, and you just got to be super careful with what you're doing because you will knock it down. It's going to happen. All right, so we do have a few minutes left, got about 2.5 minutes. Let's go up and check out some questions. This one's from Aaron. How do you pull string so it doesn't get twisted around cables? I have a pulling grip with a swivel, but it doesn't seem to help. My practice has always been is I would replace it, right? So if you're doing through a conduit or duct bank system, every third or fourth pull, you just consider that pull string too tied up. But I heard people say that the swivel helps. The companies I work for never gave me a swivel, so you kind of just answered my question for you. So swivels doesn't seem to help very much. Anybody in the room have any suggestions for Aaron on that, other than the one that I just gave him? So, I should reach out to a Greenlee or somebody who makes pull string and ask them, right? Another question coming in. This is from Nick. I am new. Congratulations, Nick. You didn't say how new you are. I appreciate you, buddy. I'm envious because I want to be at the beginning of our career as well. Said he just started following. Appreciate that. We do podcasts and a YouTube channel. Make sure, and we're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. We're everywhere. Says, do you know of any sources for Bixie tech level practice questions? Okay. Now, looking at your question, you're not going to qualify for a Bixie technician exam because you have to have 5 years of experience. So since you said you knew, but you didn't say how new, I have to assume you're brand spanking new, right off the showroom floor. You're going to have to go for the installer. or actually, it used to be called The Apprentice. I can't think of the new one. They changed that when they changed the name of The Apprentice. You got to go for that one first, and then you have 3 years, and then you got to upgrade to an installer. The installer got 2 different levels: installer copper, installer fiber, and then they got the technician. You can't qualify for the technician until you have 5 years experience. Now, with that being said, I suggest, Nick, that you go back and listen to my last podcast or my last YouTube video, because it says free training resources, and I go through a bunch of them. And make sure you watch the next one coming up, because I'm going to do a follow-up to that. Because you being new to the industry, you're probably not being paid a whole heck of a lot. And the pathway to making more is knowing more. My dad, I call him my mentor sometimes. He always used to tell me, "You think knowledge is expensive? Try stupidity." Yeah, I know. He's a smart man. I really, really miss the old man. Really miss him. So there's lots of free resources out there, and you're doing the right stuff. Just follow along. Aaron, you got another question, and I don't think I have enough time because I'm already 1 minute past. Let's see. I used to set the pull string buckets on the opposite side of my cables where coming up to the patch. It isn't perfect, but it does help stock wrapping. That's good. That's good. That's one of those things that we struggle with as installers. We really do. And I'll see if I can't get some other stuff in there. So I appreciate everybody being on here tonight, and make sure you tune in Monday for the next episode of the podcast and the vlog, and next Thursday night for the next live stream. Until next time, everybody, knowledge is power.